Summer 1943. The first fizz of a shattered worldview. Camp Crossville, Tennessee. The afternoon sun beat down on the dusty yard as a young German soldier held a glass bottle between his fingers, staring at it as if it were a relic from another universe. Inside, a brown liquid hissed and bubbled. He had never seen anything like it. He tilted it to his ear. The fizzing reminded him of faraway seas, of childhood memories long buried under desert sand and Afrika Korps discipline. Coca-Cola, 5 cents. The guard said that American children bought it with their weekly allowance. To a man who had spent 2 years surviving on ersatz coffee and dry biscuits in North Africa, this wasn't just a drink. It was an impossibility in a bottle. One sip tasted like magic. Sweetness, coldness, luxury, electricity. And as tens of thousands of German POWs arrived across American camps that summer, that same impossible taste began cracking open the ideological armor they had carried to war. The fall of the Afrika Korps, and the first taste of abundance. When Rommel's exhausted army surrendered in Tunisia in May 1943, nearly 250,000 German and Italian soldiers fell into Allied hands. They expected punishment, starvation, humiliation. Nazi propaganda had warned them. Americans are decadent and weak. Their society is collapsing. Yet within hours of surrender, German soldiers tasted something they had not experienced in months. Real food, U.S. Army care rations, despised by American troops, were treasures to their prisoners. Cheese, crackers, candy, fruit bars, sugar tablets, coffee, cigarettes. German officers stared silently at pancakes with syrup and fresh eggs served in North African processing camps. Food their own army had not provided in years. One officer later told the Red Cross, "We expected to suffer as prisoners. Instead, we ate better than in service of our own Reich." Confusion set in early. Respect followed soon after. The Liberty ships, conveyor belts of abundance. The transport across the Atlantic was the next shock. The Liberty ships, built at an industrial pace unmatched in world history. One launched every 42 hours, carried up to 30,000 POWs a month. And aboard these ships, the food given to prisoners matched the meals of the American crew. Fresh bread, meat, vegetables, coffee with real sugar, fruit, desserts. But the true miracle came cold. Ice cream, at sea, during wartime. Logs from a USS General M.B. Stewart recorded serving 10-gallon batches of ice cream to prisoners on July 4th, 1943. German POWs, who had not seen ice cream since before the war, watched in disbelief as a steel ship in the middle of the Atlantic produced frozen desserts on demand. One prisoner whispered, "If they can make ice cream in the ocean, what else can they do?" This question haunted many of them. The first glimpse of the real America. When the ships docked in Norfolk or Newport News, the assault on their worldview only intensified. The German state had taught them that America was chaotic, impoverished, racially divided, industrially incompetent. But the docks told another story. The Norfolk Naval Base handled in a day more cargo than major German ports managed in a week. At the dockside shops, POW saw shelves bursting with candy bars, Hershey, Mars, Nestle, available to anyone for a nickel. This wasn't propaganda. This was reality. And it contradicted everything they had been told. The train journey inland was another revelation. German prisoners braced for cattle cars. Instead, they found padded seats, dining cars, hot meals, fried chicken, vegetables, pie, unlimited coffee. And the guards explained, "This isn't for you. This is how Americans travel." Nazi propaganda had warned them of a collapsing, weak America. Yet the trains, the food, the ships, the docks all whispered another truth. This country is wealthier than anything you've ever imagined. Camp life, a different kind of battlefield. American POW camps shocked the prisoners more than any battlefield defeat. Camp Crossville, like many others, offered electric lights, heating, hot water, toilets, clean barracks. But the real atomic bomb was the PX store. Inside these exchanges, German prisoners found Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, root beer, candy bars, chewing gum, fresh fruit, cigarettes, ice cream in many camps, beer, 3.2% ABV, and prices that seemed unreal. 5 cents for a Coke, 5 cents for a Hershey bar. Their daily POW wages, up to $1. Enough to buy 16 bottles of soda, or 16 candy bars. Germany, where sugar was rationed to near zero, could not prepare them for this. Coca-Cola became a symbol not of American capitalism, but of American capability. Identical in taste from Maine to Texas. Delivered cold, produced in billions. Sold everywhere. German engineers were stunned. This level of standardization is impossible. But it wasn't. It was America. Sweetness as a weapon. German children rarely saw chocolate during the war. German soldiers almost never saw it. But in American camps, chocolate was routine. Sugar bowls sat openly on tables. Cakes, cookies, and pies appeared daily. Ice cream was consumed in gallons. One day in Alabama, summer humidity ruined several hundred pounds of sugar. American staff threw it away. German POWs nearly panicked, watching horrified as the staff simply ordered more. You cannot waste sugar like this. But America could, because America had something Germany no longer possessed. Backhand index pointing right the ability to produce abundance at will. The ice cream shock, the sweetness that hit harder than any bomb. By autumn 1943, a strange rumor spread among the POW camps. Americans eat ice cream every day. German prisoners laughed at first. It sounded impossible. Ice cream was something reserved for children before the war, a luxury seen only at Christmas in Germany's wealthiest neighborhoods. But then they saw it at Camp Montgomery, Alabama. Prisoners watched American soldiers line up outside a small wooden hut on base. Inside, a machine churned nonstop, producing cold, soft, perfect ice cream in August heat. Vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, butter pecan. The flavors didn't matter. The existence of such abundance did. Some POWs cried, literally cried, when handed their first scoop. A former Afrika Korps lieutenant, Ernst Wilberg, wrote, "In that moment, everything I believed about American hardship collapsed. The U.S. military generated so much ice cream that the Navy built entire ice cream barges, floating factories that made 10 gallons per minute. Germany could not produce enough milk for its own children. America produced enough to feed prisoners, sailors, soldiers, and still throw out spoiled batches without hesitation. For many Germans, the question shifted from, who are our captors? To, what kind of nation can feed millions in war better than we were fed in peace? The diner experience, a window into another civilization. Some camps allowed work details outside, performing agricultural or industrial labor. Guards often stopped at roadside diners for lunch, and POWs watched in stunned disbelief. Inside these diners, bacon sizzled, eggs cracked onto hot steel griddles, coffee refilled endlessly, stacks of pancakes drowned in maple syrup, burgers cooked in fat so thick it perfumed the air, fresh pies, apple pecan cherry, steamed behind glass, and the most shocking detail, ordinary Americans left food on their plates. German POWs would sit in silence, unable to comprehend such a concept. To them, leaving food was immoral, leaving meat nearly criminal, leaving dessert unimaginable. In a diner in Texas, a prisoner whispered to the guard, "Why do they not finish it? Do they not know hunger?" The guard replied, confused, "It's just too much food, that's all." Too much food. To men who had seen children in Germany begging for potato peels. This wasn't simply abundance. It was abundance so vast it became casual. The agricultural earthquake, America's farms as weapons of war. The agricultural work assignments shook German POWs more than any military facility. In Germany, farms were small. Machinery was primitive. Manpower was scarce. Food production was in collapse. In America, German prisoners encountered tractors larger than German tanks, mechanized harvesters that cut fields in minutes, trucks piled high with grain, irrigation systems miles long, barns overflowing with corn, wheat, hay, fruit orchards stretching to the horizon. One POW in Nebraska wrote, "Our entire village could not produce what one American farm produced in a week." German officers, proud of their nation's engineering tradition, were humiliated by the raw force of American agricultural efficiency. When guards bulldozed hundreds of oranges because prices were too low to ship them, German prisoners stared in horror. In Germany, children were eating grass. In America, fruit was being destroyed because it wasn't profitable enough. Nothing destroyed Nazi propaganda more effectively than a mountain of fruit being thrown away. The American food culture, beyond imagination. Camps introduced POWs to American staples they didn't know existed: peanut butter, marshmallows, cornbread, donuts, milkshakes, Jell-O, canned peaches, hot dogs, chili, waffles. And then came Thanksgiving 1943. While the war raged across Europe, German prisoners in dozens of camps were served roasted turkey, gravy, mashed potatoes, sweet potatoes, beans, pie, cranberry sauce, coffee, ice cream. At Camp Huntsville, Texas, the orchestra, composed of POWs, played American holiday music, while German prisoners enjoyed a feast they had not seen in years. Many were so overwhelmed that they asked the guards if this was some kind of deception. But it wasn't. This was just an American holiday. Nothing more. Nothing less. Christmas, the day the Nazi worldview collapsed completely. Christmas 1943 became the breaking point. In Germany, Christmas during wartime was bleak. Cold homes, blackout curtains, empty tables, silent prayers, fathers missing, ration bread, no sweets, no gifts. But in American camps, German POWs were given cakes, candies, cigarettes, cards from American families, hot chocolate, carols sung by local church choirs, decorations handmade by school children, a full Christmas meal that many had not tasted since childhood. At some camps, church groups delivered small packages wrapped in paper. Inside were basics: soap, socks, razor blades, candy, simple gifts, human gifts, unimaginable gifts. A prisoner from the 164th Infantry Regiment wrote, "We had been taught Americans were soulless. Yet here, strangers showed us more kindness than our own government ever had." In that moment, many German POWs began to understand they had not been fighting evil. They had been fighting a people who lived in a different universe. The post-exchange economy, when POWs started sending food home. As camps allowed POWs to earn modest wages through labor programs, something extraordinary happened. German prisoners began pooling their money to buy food from the PX, chocolate, canned goods, sugar, coffee, to send home to their starving families through the Red Cross. America had enough food to feed its military, its civilians, millions of workers, millions of children, and its enemies, then export surplus, then still have more. No one in Germany believed the packages were real at first, but they were, and German parents, opening tins of American food sent by their captured sons, understood something that changed their lives. America was not the monster. America was the miracle. The Industrial Revolution, where the real shock began. Everything the prisoners had seen, the food, the farms, the trains, was only the introduction. The real collapse of their worldview arrived when American guards took selected POW groups to work near steel mills, assembly plants, shipyards, processing factories, buildings so large they could contain entire German towns, machines so loud they shook the earth, assembly lines so fast they seemed inhuman. German engineers stared in silence as they understood a truth that their government had hidden. This country could not be defeated. Not in a year, not in 10, not in a century. Because America wasn't just rich. It wasn't just abundant. It was industrial on a scale that Germany could not mathematically comprehend. The day German prisoners saw the factories and their world collapsed. If the food had shaken them, if the trains had impressed them, if the ice cream had confused them, then the factories destroyed them. In 1944, selected German POW work detachments were assigned near American industrial plants, steel mills, automobile factories, food processing plants, foundries, machining centers. For many prisoners, this was a moment they truly understood the war was unwinnable. One wrote, "I believed I knew what a factory was. Then I saw the American version. German factories, even the impressive ones in Ruhr, felt like toys compared to what they saw in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, places they had mocked in propaganda as backward or crude. Instead, they discovered buildings the size of small cities, conveyor belts stretching longer than airfields, furnaces glowing like artificial suns, mountains of raw steel, assembly lines producing thousands of identical machines per day. A single American automotive plant could build more engines in 2 weeks than Germany produced in 6 months. A POW who was a German engineer before the war said, "I realized immediately this war was not between armies. It was between industries, and ours was already dead." The automobile shock, cars everywhere. In Germany, cars were rare. In America, cars were everywhere. Cars in driveways, cars in streets, cars in parking lots bigger than entire German villages, cars outside factories, diners, houses, barns. POWs repeatedly counted cars owned by factory workers, cars owned by farmers, cars owned by teachers, cars owned by janitors. Many Americans owned 2 cars. A German officer muttered, "Even a schoolteacher here lives like a baron." Propaganda told them Americans were poor, chaotic, failing. But what they saw was a society where even ordinary people lived with abundance German officers couldn't comprehend. And that realization hurt more deeply than any battlefield defeat. The electricity miracle, light everywhere. German POWs were stunned by something Americans didn't even notice. Electricity, everywhere, every building, every room, every barn, every kitchen, every lamp, every farm, every home. Light switches that worked every single time. Refrigerators humming with cold air. Stoves heated instantly. Radios in every house. Factories glowing like daylight at midnight. In Germany, blackout regulations and shortages had made darkness a part of life. In America, the night glowed. A prisoner in Arizona wrote, "At home we fear the night. Here they banish it." Another described the lighted streets with a single word, impossible. Electricity, the invisible backbone of modern civilization, revealed itself as America's greatest weapon. The wage shock. Americans earned more than German officers. POWs working on farms or in factories began asking questions. How much does a worker earn? How much does a farmer make? How much does a teacher get paid? They weren't prepared for the answers. A factory worker in Detroit could earn more in a month than a German officer earned in 3. A farmer in Iowa earned more than some German industrialists. A truck driver made more money than a German engineer. A POW wrote, "We realize the American worker lives better than the German elite." This was the moment the ideological foundations of Nazism, hierarchy, superiority, nationalism, began to crumble, because what they were seeing was not capitalism gone wild. It was prosperity built on scale, fairness, and competence. The radio shock, information as a freedom they never knew. In American camps, POWs listened to radio programs, news, sports, music, comedy, drama, political discussion, and something extraordinary, criticism of the U.S. government, on American radio, broadcast to everyone. This was unthinkable in Germany. Propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels had fed them a lifetime of lies about America being controlled by Jewish industrialists, moral decay, and weak institutions. But the radio said otherwise. Every station spoke freely, openly, boldly. German officers sat stunned as American commentators criticized Roosevelt's decisions, the Army's mistakes, and congressional debates. A POW wrote, We were told America was not free. Yet I have never heard such freedom spoken aloud. Freedom of information. The Reich never had it. America lived by it. The racial impact. What destroyed Hitler's ideology. Nazi propaganda had drilled into their minds that America was racially chaotic, degenerate, collapsing. Yet in camps and on farms, German POWs saw Black Americans working as foremen, Mexican Americans holding responsible jobs, white, Black, and Latino soldiers sharing mess halls, integrated work crews on farms, civilians interacting without tension, local communities welcoming POWs despite the war. One stunned Luftwaffe officer wrote, "We expected racial hatred. We found cooperation." This did not mean America was free of racism. Far from it. But what POWs saw with their own eyes contradicted everything they had been taught about alleged racial superiority. Some German prisoners even began questioning the core of Hitler's master race doctrine. One wrote home, "We were the blind ones, not them." Letters home, the documents that terrified Berlin. Prisoners wrote thousands of letters to their families, describing American abundance, describing wages, describing food, describing fairness, describing technology, describing kindness. Censors in Germany confiscated many of them, but some got through. One letter from a POW in Texas became infamous in Berlin. "America is a paradise for workers. We were fools." The Gestapo interrogated the soldier's family for weeks. Another wrote, "If we had lived like this, we would never have followed Hitler." The German government realized the truth. Its own POWs were being converted not by propaganda, but by reality. And the reality was overwhelming. The ideological collapse, the most powerful weapon, is example. The more German prisoners saw of America, the harder it became to believe the lies they grew up with. America was weak, false. Americans were starving, false. Democracy was chaotic, false. Industrial collapse, false. Racial war, false. Capitalist exploitation, false. Everything they saw contradicted Nazi ideology with brutal clarity. One SS soldier, deeply indoctrinated, wrote, "They defeated us long before we surrendered, not with guns, but with everything we do not have." America's greatest weapon wasn't the Sherman, or the B-17, or the aircraft carrier. It was prosperity. It was freedom. It was abundance. It was competence. It was scale. These were things Germany could not mass produce. And German POWs now understood it. The moment POWs stepped into American homes, and everything changed forever. By early 1945, German POWs across the United States were working in local communities, on farms and forests, at canneries, in mills, at construction sites. And sometimes, unexpectedly, American families invited them in for coffee, for lunch, for shade on a hot day, for Christmas carols, for Thanksgiving leftovers, for kindness. One POW described the experience. "We were prepared to face our enemy. We were not prepared to meet their humanity." Inside these homes they saw warm kitchens, refrigerators humming with cold air, radios playing swing music, children laughing, photographs of fathers at war, books, toys, games. Families of modest means living better than German officers. This wasn't propaganda. This wasn't staged. This was the everyday life of ordinary Americans. And for many German soldiers, it planted a question more painful than defeat. What were we fighting for if our enemy lived like this? The spiritual defeat, when the Nazi worldview dies. The psychological collapse of Nazi ideology did not happen in one moment. It happened slowly, silently, everywhere, in a diner filled with abundance, in a farmhouse with electric lights, in a factory humming like a living beast, in Christmas cards written by American children, in the simple kindness of strangers, in a refrigerator filled with more food than a German street could see in a week. A POW wrote home, "We believed we were superior, but they lived better than kings." Another said, "In their wealth there is no arrogance. In their power there is no cruelty." It was not American propaganda that broke the Nazi worldview. It was American normality, a normality so far beyond what German soldiers had known that it became a revelation. The return to Germany, a land of ashes and emptiness. When the war ended, repatriation began. German POWs boarded ships again, but this time the direction was reversed. As they approached Europe, many felt a tightening in their chest. They knew what awaited them on the other side of the ocean. Bombed cities, burned factories, broken rail lines, hunger, rubble, orphans, starvation, a country in ruins. But knowing it was not the same as seeing it. When prisoners arrived in the shattered remains of Bremen, Hamburg, Kiel, Lübeck, Bremerhaven, silence fell over them. A POW officer described the moment. I felt as if I had returned from the future to the Middle Ages. Some men cried openly, not because they were home, but because they now understood what they had lost forever. They had seen America, clean streets, fresh food, modern industry, warm homes, radio, electricity, dignity. And now they stepped into a landscape that looked like the apocalypse, the inevitable outcome of an ideology that had promised glory and delivered ruin, the unbearable comparison, and the beginning of a new Germany. Former POWs encountered their families, mothers with hollow eyes, children with thin faces, wives who had walked miles for bread, homes without windows, stoves without coal, pantries without food. Many of them carried with them ration tins they had saved for their loved ones, and American chocolate, and canned peaches, and powdered milk, because they knew their families needed it. And in those moments, the final crack appeared. How could a country that treated us like humans give more food to its prisoners than our own nation gave to its people? This question became the seed of something new, a desire to rebuild Germany, not as a copy of the Reich, but as a society more like the one they had glimpsed in captivity, a society based on fairness, abundance, freedom, human dignity, cooperation, democracy. Thousands of former POWs became teachers, engineers, politicians, entrepreneurs, civic leaders, democratic reformers. The Marshall Plan found in them fertile ground. Their memories of America became blueprints for the Wirtschaftswunder, wonder. The German economic miracle. America had not only fed them, it had changed them, and they carried that change home. The final reunions, when enemies became friends. In the decades after the war, something extraordinary happened. German POWs returned to the towns where they had once been prisoners. They visited farms. They visited families. They visited the old barracks. They visited the diners. Some came back to thank the people who had shown them kindness. Others came back to show their children the place where their beliefs had changed. Many brought scrapbooks filled with letters, photos, memories. In the 1980s, a German veteran stood before an American church group and said, "You defeated us not with weapons, but with the example of a better life." Another said, "I came as a soldier. I left as a different man." And the last words of the reunion organizer captured the entire essence of the POW experience. We came here as enemies. We left as witnesses. Witnesses to prosperity. Witnesses to humanity. Witnesses to a truth that destroyed an empire. America's greatest weapon was not steel or fire, but abundance and freedom.